Heading into this round, I don't think anyone expected Cagliari to walk into Lecce's backyard and pull off a win. Lecce at home are usually a tough nut to crack, but Cagliari just seized their moments. What stood out to you most from that match?
Honestly, what grabbed me was Cagliari's composure under pressure. Lecce came out swinging, but every time they made a mistake at the back, Cagliari pounced. That kind of clinical finishing is what keeps teams afloat in a tough league, especially for squads fighting to stay above the relegation zone.
Right, and you could see Lecce getting more and more frustrated as the game slipped away. Their attack just couldn't break through, and it felt like they lacked that final bit of sharpness in the box. Maybe they missed a trick not switching things up earlier?
Yeah, I think so. It almost felt like Lecce were banking on their usual rhythm to bail them out, but when it didn't, they looked short on ideas. Cagliari's defense deserves credit. They kept their shape and didn't panic, even as the pressure mounted late on.
That actually reminds me of Bologna's performance this week, too. They were put under serious heat by Genoa in the second half, but managed to hold firm and snatch all 3 points.
Bologna's first-half energy was something else. They totally owned the midfield, and you could sense Genoa were chasing shadows at times. But the turnaround after halftime was wild. Genoa came so close to leveling it up.
I know, right? It was like a tale of 2 different matches. Bologna showed, though, that sometimes grinding out a result is just as important as playing pretty football. You could feel the nerves creeping in after Genoa scored, but the home crowd really helped push them over the line.
That late surge from Genoa had me on the edge of my seat. But it also highlighted an issue: Bologna's second-half game management. They almost let it slip, and against a more clinical side, that could have cost them. Still, pulling off the win says a lot about their resilience.
True. And speaking of teams holding their own, did you catch Verona's defensive masterclass against Juventus? That was a result few saw coming.
What surprised me most is how well Verona stuck to their plan. They pressed high, stayed organized, and just refused to let Juve settle. That 1-1 draw probably felt like a win for them, honestly.
Juventus, meanwhile, looked so flat. Usually you expect some spark, but they barely created anything clear-cut. I wonder if it's a tactical thing or more about individual form dropping off.
Probably a mix of both. When a team's plan A isn't working, you want to see some flexibility, maybe a new approach mid-game. But Juve kept banging their heads against Verona's wall. Verona's discipline really set the tone for the whole match.
It's wild how a well-organized defense can rattle even the most star-studded attacks. But then, on the flip side, Milan showed what happens when everything clicks going forward.
Milan's performance was just ruthless. The movement, the speed of passing, it looked like they were 2 steps ahead all night. Udinese just couldn't cope with the pressure or find any answers at the back.
After watching that, I can't help but think Milan are serious title contenders this year. When they turn it on like that, it's hard to see who stops them. Udinese were chasing shadows. Do you think this loss is more about Milan's quality or Udinese's shortcomings?
It's got to be both, but mainly Milan's quality. They made Udinese look ordinary, and that takes some doing. But at the same time, Udinese's defense was way too passive. If you give Milan's attackers time and space, you're asking for trouble.
Switching gears a bit, let's talk about the Derby della Capitale. Roma versus Lazio is always spicy, and this one didn't disappoint.
That match was pure tension from start to finish. Roma just edged it with a moment of magic, but what impressed me was their defensive resolve after taking the lead. Lazio came at them hard but couldn't break through.
It felt like every tackle, every clearance from Roma had extra weight to it, especially in those final minutes. That win is going to mean so much for their confidence and maybe shake Lazio a bit after missing their chances.
Exactly. In derbies, it's not just about tactics, it's about nerve. Roma held theirs. Lazio will be frustrated, but they'll know they let a big opportunity slip. On the other hand, Atalanta's win was all about sheer attacking power.
Atalanta just don't take their foot off the gas, do they? That front line was relentless against Torino. Every attack looked dangerous, and their pressing was a nightmare to play against.
Torino really struggled to find any rhythm. Atalanta just suffocated them high up the pitch, and whenever Torino tried to break out, they were swarmed. It's no wonder Atalanta are being talked about as serious contenders for Europe.
These are the kinds of performances that build belief in a squad. And then, right after that, we got a much more cagey affair between Cremonese and Parma.
That match was the total opposite of Atalanta-Torino. Both teams really played it safe. There were barely any clear chances, and you could sense that neither side wanted to risk getting caught out.
Yeah, it was almost like both managers agreed to a gentleman's draw before kickoff. Still, I get why they were cautious. A point keeps them steady, but it won't help them climb the table if that keeps happening.
Fans probably left feeling a bit let down, especially after some of the fireworks we saw elsewhere this week. But then again, not every match can be a thriller unless maybe you're Como taking on Fiorentina.
That was hands down the shock of the week for me. Como not only hung in there, they actually made Fiorentina pay for every mistake. You could see the confidence growing with each counterattack.
What's wild is that Fiorentina had their chances but just couldn't put them away. Como, on the other hand, barely wasted anything. They made every attack count. It's a huge win for them, and probably a real wake-up call for Fiorentina.
Upsets like this are what make football so addictive. And speaking of teams scraping out tough wins, Inter versus Sassuolo was way closer than the scoreline suggests.
I've gotta say, Sassuolo pushed Inter to their limit. For long stretches, it looked like Inter were going to drop points, but then that flash of individual skill made all the difference. Sometimes that's what separates champions from the rest.
Sassuolo shouldn't hang their heads, though. They showed real courage and technical quality. But Inter's knack for grinding out a result, even on an off day, is impressive. That resilience is what keeps them in the title conversation.
Totally. But if you want drama, the Napoli-Pisa game had it in spades, goals, chaos, and a heart-stopping finish.
That game was a roller coaster. I lost count of how many times the momentum swung back and forth. Napoli's attack looked electric, but defensively, they left the door open just a bit too often for comfort.
Pisa really refused to back down. Even after falling behind, they kept swinging, and you could sense Napoli's nerves every time Pisa pushed forward. Sure, Napoli's firepower won it, but you'd think they'll want to tighten things up at the back if they're aiming high this season.
For sure. And honestly, after a week full of surprises, tactical chess matches, and wild scorelines, I can't wait to see what next round brings.